Okay. It's the late hours of Festivus. December 23rd. Festivus is a holiday my friends and I celebrate. Some of you might celebrate Festivus. If you do, you know, may your grievances be aired and your feet be strong, I guess. So I want to talk about some things. The holiday season is here. It's like here. And it's got me feeling a bunch of ways. And there's a lot to talk about and a lot to go over. So this discussion is going to be it's going to be like a pinball game uh, from topic to topic as you just watch me uh, on my likely undiagnosed, untreated ADHD joyride through holidays past and related topics. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, uh, I was born in November. The end of the year has always been an extended holiday season for me, starting with Halloween, a week, like a week or two before my birthday. So growing up, it was Halloween, birthday, Thanksgiving, uh, my cousin's birthday, my dad's birthday, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, and then New Year's Day, and then you're kind of done with day off type holidays for a while. For my birthday, I would spend time both at my parents' house and my grandparents' house. Christmas Eve was always at my grandparents' house, and Christmas morning was at my parents' house. For the uninitiated, my parents live two houses down from my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, my mom's parents, and it's been that way forever. And so my house where I live is also within that vicinity. So we have this small little ecosystem here that's part of why I stayed, because it was familiar and I knew it, and that was important. And so, because I was so close growing up to my grandparents' house, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. We would spend our summer vacations there while my parents were working, and we would spend. My grandparents would pick us up from school and we'd hang out there um, until our parents got home from work. Spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. Uh, there was never there was never any question about what the holiday routine was, because it never really changed. Around dark on Christmas Eve, my family would walk from my parents' house to my grandparents' house, usually just straight through the yard in between. And when we got there, there were already several people here from my family. My uncle, his daughter, which is my cousin, sometimes her mom. They're divorced, but they would still both be here for several years. My grandparents obviously lived here. My grandpa's mom, which was my great grandma, and for a while that was kind of like the core, I guess. There were some people that came and went. Occasionally, one of my grandpa's brothers would show up, and then you know my cousin is older than me, and so she would start bringing boyfriends around when she started dating. And then when I was 7, my sister was born, and so the family was slowly evolving. Um, my mom's cousin kind of came back into the fold, and she had her own family to bring. My cousin ended up getting married, having kids. She's got her own family to bring. And so, now my sister's married, has her own kids. So it just constantly is, expanding like family trees do. So by the mid 2000s or so, hype for Christmas Eve started on Thanksgiving night, where most, but not necessarily all my family also attended. I say all my family, I don't mean all of it, because this mostly relates to my mom's side of the family. My dad grew up all over the country, all over the world. He lived several places outside of the U.S. And so his family lives mostly up north. My mom's family lives mostly here in St. Louis, and so it's not that like it's not equitable, it's not fair, but like that's not the way the world works. A truly equitable and fair system would be for us to have grown up equidistant between all grandparents, and then spend trips in the summer to go out and see either of them, right? But that's not the way the world works. And so I don't want to convey that my dad's side of the family isn't part of my life. They are, just that because of the location, they were not as often part of Christmas celebrations in in person. And so just want to get that established and set up. But anyway, after Thanksgiving dinner, my mom, my cousin, my mom's cousin, anyone interested in shopping would get the Black Friday ads out of the paper when you'd get ads in the paper and plan their late night expedition through breakneck retail. I don't remember much of this growing up, like early years, but I feel like anybody that was there could tell you that like there was a time where Black Friday peaked. You had folks lined up for days, skipping Thanksgiving, camping outside of the stores, trampling people. Also, they could get a super sweet deal on a 32-inch 720p LCD TV for a mere like $900. This is probably an exaggeration, but you can actually go on BlackFridayArchive.com, and they actually have all the ads. Not all the ads. They have a bunch of ads from Black Friday years past. So if you ever want to know how the price of some things have actually gone down instead of up, it's kind of wild to go look and see, what people used to pay for TVs and video games and appliances, I guess. But as time went on, Black Friday encroached more and more onto Thanksgiving. I think in 2008 or 2009, kind of towards the end of my time in high school, a lot of your Black Friday stores would open like before dawn, maybe even early hours of the morning, like 3 or 4 a.m. And then by 2014, after I was done with college, and I think at that point I bought my house, I know at least at Best Buy, because I worked there for that season. That's where this is going. I worked at Best Buy for a holiday season. They were opening up on Thanksgiving. They were just not even, like, we're moving into Thanksgiving. And so, but that's another thing I want to talk about, jobs, right? Because I had a job working for my dad from 06 to 09. He had a guitar shop, and I was like the shopkeep up front while he would teach lessons, do repairs, and we would sometimes, when he didn't have lessons, we were both shopkeeps. And so, he's in the family, he makes the rules, it's his shop, and it's a family-run business, so it was never a concern. Obviously, I'm going to be here for Christmas Eve and Christmas, and I'm not going to miss anything, because he's not going to run the shop during those times. And then, as I grew up, I had to get a job, and jobs don't, like a proper job, and jobs don't tend to care as much. The bottom dollar, the bottom line is more important. And so I started working at the hobby shop in 2012, and that was a family-run small business, and they were pretty cool with, like, we were never open on Thanksgiving at all. I don't think we really even had extended Black Friday hours, and so it was fairly ordinary. We always had Christmas off, but at any point, I felt like it could become an issue, right? I could be like, I need to go to a different retail job, or like one year, I'd just be in a different position where I do work Christmas or something like that. And there were years where I would go straight from work, get off work, and drive straight to my grandparents' house to get there for Christmas Eve. Where, most of my life I just spent all day at home waiting for the time that my parents would round us up and go to my grandparents' house. And so while it was never an issue for me, sometimes it was an issue for other folks that were here, not just working, but things tend to get in the way of life. As much as we want to be at our traditions. And then some of us just reach the end of our lives and fall out of the fold. So my grandparents bought their house brand new in the mid to late 50s when it was they might have bought it before it was even done being built. I don't know. They raised my mom and uncle here. My grandpa served in Korea and came back and became a union sheet metal worker. My grandma worked at the local grocery store when I was a kid, and my grandpa, I think by that point, was at least a marshal at the golf course because he loved golfing. And so to almost anybody that ever went to one of our family Christmas Eves, those folks knew this place as, like, that's their house, right? One building that represented a union and the foundation for a family tree that is still sprawling to this day. And so, being the hosts to the grand family gathering at the end of the year, what happens when one of them dies? My grandpa was a smoker, I think up until around the time I was born, or maybe a little bit after. I never knew him to be a smoker, but people always told me that he did. And he gave it up, I think, cold turkey. Here's the thing. If you give up a substance that's you need to get rid of, I don't care if you do it cold turkey, if you wean yourself off, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you're making a choice that improves your life and your living conditions. Don't let anybody, they're all equally valid. Okay, and so, but he was a smoker, and as time drew on, he developed COPD, and he was having a progressively harder time breathing, which is important, obviously. And it got to a point where he would take a few steps and just had to stop and catch his breath, right? And that's like, that's not that's not ideal. Um, and he was late 70s. He'd probably I know he was at least 80, late 70s to 80. I'm getting there. Christmas Eve 2013 was his last with the family. His breathing was bad enough that he could not safely join the rest of the family in the basement, which is where the Christmas Eves always were. And so we basically each took turns. He was up in the TV room, and we all just kind of took turns and spent time with him on like a one-on-one basis. And then we come down here and join the rest of the family for what's going on down here. It sucked on a number of levels, and there might have been some additional drama that happened that year that wasn't fair or kind to those involved. And if I were an elder patriarch of a decent-sized family, that's not how I'd want my last Christmas to go, but otherwise we did what we could, and we pressed on. He passed away a few weeks later, mid to late January. We knew it was coming because he was in hospice care. I made sure to see him one last time. I brought my first Raspberry Pi. It was a Gen 1 Raspberry Pi with me because he'd always told me how important computers would be in the future, and he was always pressing me to get into computers, even if he didn't quite understand them. To my grandpa, computers were the machine he played solitaire on in Free Cell, which is solitaire. I never saw him do much on computers besides that, but he knew how to do that really well. But bringing that little Raspberry Pi was just a way to like keep the conversation grounded, to make it feel like it was just a normal conversation that he and I would have up to that point, and less like less like the last conversation. You know what I mean? I didn't want to convey like well, this is the last conversation we're gonna have. What are we gonna talk about? I just wanted to like be like a natural conversation. And so I was like, yeah, look at this little computer that I got. Look how small they've gotten, right? And I think he misinterpreted what I said and thought I had built it from scratch, and I wasn't going to tell him, no, I just bought this. But when he saw the little thing, he said to me, I always knew you could do it, referring to computer literacy, presumably. The conversation went on, and eventually I had to leave to go meet up with a wedding client, and sometime in the week after that, he passed away. The weeks that followed were the weeks that followed were what you'd expect. Nothing unordinary when it comes to a mourning, grieving family. And then, I feel like as best I can recall, 11 months later, when Christmas came back around, it wasn't back to normal, but we were ready to carry on in his memory, and yeah, it felt weird, but like we had to carry on. We couldn't change the plan. We couldn't change the tradition. We just had to know that the paradigm had shifted, and it is very much what he would have wanted was to carry on without him, because that's just that's just the way people are often. And so, plus, think about this. This was my grandma's first holiday without her husband, my mom's first holiday without her dad, my cousin and my brother and sister and my first holiday without our grandpa. And so we had to put it on. We had to keep it going. And so it was important to have like the same caliber of celebration as we'd always had. And so as years went on, my grandma was alone in her house, but she had the support of my parents down the street, and I was also right here. I was often called upon to fix tech issues, TV's not working, computers not working, stuff like that. And then, they do say that, like, and plus my uncle still lived up here, and he would make a weekly trip out and visit with my grandma. And so they say that women outlive men, and that was evidence of it, because they were both born in the same year. They were born like a month apart, and she just kept going. And so for a few more years, everything was as normal as it could be. Things started to change, I think, in 2018. At or around Thanksgiving that year, my mom said the magic words, "I know what I want for Christmas." I pulled up a metaphorical chair and a pen and paper and took notes, because I suck at buying gifts for people. And I have the money now. I just don't have the good ideas. And so when anybody says they know what they want, I listen, because if you tell me you want it and I get it for you and you don't want it, that's on you. It's not on me. And we'll get to more of that later. But these days I just store it in a Google Doc all year round. Anytime I hear it, I just pull it up, add to it. It's in the cloud. She told me she wanted all the home movies we had converted to DVDs so she could watch them whenever she wanted. This was in my wheelhouse. Not to sound like an old timer though, I'm only 32 at this point. But back in the day, we'd capture memories and birthdays and Christmases whenever we could. Sometimes just random days in the life on camcorders. Before that, we used film. My grandparents always had camcorders that recorded on these little compact VHS tapes. And they were VHS because you could put them in a converter tape and a VCR, put it in and watch it on the TV. And my parents instead had a high 8. It was an 8mm magnetic video camera. The picture quality was better, but you could only watch it back. You had to use the camcorder itself as the VCR. You couldn't use a regular VCR to watch it. So it was more of a hassle to watch those. But my grandparents had kept all their tapes at their house, and my brother and sister and I would sometimes just sit down and just watch through all of them in a row. We loved watching home movies. I think when my mom asked me for this, she had a collection of her own that she wanted me to digitize, but I came to my grandparents' house and knew where the stash was and grabbed those as well. And that was probably, I think, Thanksgiving night that year. I went home and got straight to work. I think in total there were 21 hours of just tapes from over the years, and it was a really fun project. It was really gratifying to complete. I was able to use various bits of footage and frames from that footage, like a detective, to determine when these events took place, like which year the Christmas was, based on who's there, and for example, like in this one, I'm wearing glasses, but I don't have a mullet yet, so it's sometime between 3rd and 5th grade, stuff like that. And so out of this, I produced this really sweet, 5-disc DVD set in chronological order, made custom labels and a case, and gave copies to my mom and my grandma for them both to watch whenever they wanted. Since then, anytime I uncover a videotape, from a home movie that just got put away somewhere else, I archive it digitally, try to get it up in the cloud, put it on Google, put it on YouTube unlisted, make copies of it so that way I know it's not going anywhere. And so with the end of this year here, everyone was posting about their Spotify Wrapped, at the beginning of the month, and it had me in several conversations talking about the importance of physical media, something I feel like not enough people do appreciate. Today we don't use camcorders or film cameras to capture memories like we used to. We use our phones, right? We have everything we need in our pocket, and that's great because you're a second away from recording a memory. But when we do that, where do they all go? Where do all those memories go? Do they get put up in the cloud? Do we post them? Do we sit on them? Do we remember to transfer them to our new devices when we get upgraded phones? What happens when we lose those phones, or they become broken, or they get stolen? What happens to those memories because they're just ones and zeros in a chip somewhere? We used to be limited by the length of tape or the amount of shots on a roll of film, and now, I'm not saying it's limitless, but it's levels of magnitude more content we could capture, more memories we could capture, and so we could capture everything. But now we've hit choice paralysis. We don't know what to capture, and when we capture, we don't know what to do with it. And so now I have this set of DVDs that I'll look at every now and then, and in those DVDs I have footage from 8 or 9 or 10 Christmases. I have all these memories on record that I can hold and look at and remember, but are those records, those memories, is that Christmas? And 2018 also marked another change in the series of events. Going into Christmas, I think it was 2018. My cousin had some surgery that she had to get done and they just like either they had to do it on Christmas Eve or something like that. One way or another, she wasn't gonna be able to make it for like the first time in her entire life. She couldn't make it to Christmas Eve at my grandparents' house, and like that's gotta suck, dude. Like that's all. That sounds like it'd be like an awful thing to go through. Um, you've done it for 35 years or whatever, and something takes you out of the running, and it's not like you just don't like. Also, it's like a big event in the year, right? It's a habit that got broken, but it's not just like brushing your teeth every day in a row. If you miss a day, it's not gonna kill you, right? It's Christmas Eve, right? Um, so 2019 rolled around, and like for those of you playing along at home, you know what's coming up. You know what years are coming up. And I feel like my cousin got super super sick at the end of the year and just couldn't make it, right? Um, so that's 2 years in a row, you know. And then 2020 obviously brought on the pandemic. Uh, Despite being houses away from my grandparents and my grandparents' house and my parents' house, I was trying to reduce contact because we're looking at the winter 2020. Immune systems are weakened and COVID is going around. Um, I don't remember what we did for Thanksgiving. I think we might have just done like takeout orders from my parents' house and eaten at home, like ate at Fred House. Um, but the plan for Christmas Eve was that all of us in the family were going to stop by one on one, kind of like what we did with my grandpa that one year. And we'd all be in the house, just not all at the same time. And we could, like I'm sure my cousin came back that year, right? I didn't see her the year, but even then, I was still wearing my respirator, right? I wore a 3M paint respirator for most of the pandemic when I was around others. Uh, and that year, I had just gotten my table saw. And so I made my mom a cutting board, and also was like, I just went ahead and made my grandma this 5-panel collage of pictures of all the family, through the ages because I'd started archiving still photos on top of the videos. And so I had a small history of making things for Christmas gifts instead of buying them, but didn't always resort to it. I was afraid it'd be seen as cheap, and but now I had some better tools to use and had a use for them. I think in 2021, for my birthday that year, my mom got me these blue LED meteor shower lights. They're kind of like icicle lights, but they have some motion to them. They're in tubes, and I think it was that year, and that was the year I think that my mom wrote in my birthday card that year. Uh, I I hope this is the year that you remember how to believe. Which I still have that card because that was wildly cryptic. It could have meant anything, and so by the time the holiday season rolled around, I decided, my nephew had been born that summer, my niece had been born that summer, and it seemed like, I should do something to make sure that they come into a world where Christmases are celebrated and they're special, I guess. And that's when the bug hit me. When I started exploring how my skills and my interests and my capacity to become passionate overnight about something can affect how I take in Christmas. So in 2021, I did my first lighting display on my house. It wasn't a whole lot. I think I had I don't know, like 1,500 lights or something like that. And so since then, I've worked to outdo myself every year. That's the only person I'm competing with. And so I set out to be as energy efficient as possible. It's all LEDs, and only I have thousands of lights now, drawing several hundred watts, which I'm pretty proud of. And so I've grown. Like I said, my parents' house, my house, my grandparents' house, all kind of in like the same area, and so I grew up running around these streets for fun, and I remember driving around, or rather being driven around in my parents' cars and my grandparents' cars this time of year and seeing all the lights that people had put up and how into it people got. And like how, yeah, it was like a big, it was a great part of the holidays was going around and seeing all the lights. But it just didn't seem like it was that it didn't seem like people did that anymore, and not in the same capacity as they used to. And so, like, had my neighborhood just lost that part of the season, or is it one of those things where the world just looks different because you're smaller and less experienced? Kind of like how time works differently. How 5 minutes feels like an eternity when you're 6, but 5 minutes passes like that when it's your lunch break, right? Uh, what I do know is that I look, when I was looking down the street in the 2010s and 2020s, was that just it was dark. It felt like the space between the street lights was longer than it had ever been, and not enough people were putting up lights in their yard. And I can't go around and say, "Hey, put lights in your yard." All I can do is put them up in mine. And so I remember what it felt like to see all those lights as a kid and what that added to the holiday season. And now Shred House is just this beacon of bright light that you can see from several places in the neighborhood, all over the place. And people will compliment me on it all the time. And it's not that like I need to hear it from them that it's a good display. I need to hear it from them that they were affected by it, right? That it did something for their holiday season. But is that what Christmas is to me? Still in 2021, I decided it was important to have a proper tree in the house, a real tree, right? Um, and so my niece's parents and Roxanne and I went out and we went to the tree lot and we decided we're going to cut our own tree. We did that. We've done that ever since. When I was growing up, my parents had a fake tree or two, and you had to like put it together, right? And like put the branches into the trunk, and spray them, splay them out. And my dad really craved the real tree, so we eventually we switched, and we would either sometimes we went to the lot to cut it down, or sometimes we just went to the lot at like Kmart's parking lot and bought one. Both were fine. They always liked spruce and fir trees, and I think I like those too. They had like the short, thicker needles, like my shrubs have in my front yard. But the place we go to cut ours down, they only have pine trees, which they also have the long, real thin needles. And so yeah, I'm craving a spruce or a fir tree, but only if I can cut it down myself. Um, that's what they put in their living room. My grandparents though, they were in camp fake tree, which is fine. They had like upstairs in the living room. They would have right as you walked in, you'd see in the corner like a very tall white fake tree with like blue and maybe like gold or chrome ornaments on it. It was like a blue and white ish tree, very bright, very bright tree. It lit the whole room. And then down in the basement, I remember like when your grandma like would ask my brother and I to help her put the tree up, and we just similar assembly to the one of my parents' house, and we put the tree up and we would put the ornaments up. It was one of the best times of the year, and so, but like for I don't know when in the year that we would start doing tree stuff. Because you can put a fake tree up whenever you want. When you go buy a real tree, if you buy it from the lot, I think they're all cut from the farm at the same time, so it doesn't really matter. But they got a lifetime. They're going to start dying and showing that they're dead. So you gotta time that correctly. But like it would just sit. I feel like both my parents and grandparents would just leave nothing under the tree until the time it was time came to open stuff. Um, and so when we came down from dinner on Christmas Eve at my grandparents' house, you'd see just how many presents were under that tree. Uh, and yeah, because it was a massive gift exchange at my grandparents' house. You had my grandparents would give everybody, all their descendants, gifts, right? And then you had like cross generational gifts, like from my parents to my uncle. From my parents, my cousins, stuff like that. You had like sub families within the family. I feel like I'm talking about a mafia. It's not, but yeah, that's what it was like. You have so many presents that they were overflowing. You had to put them on the coffee table, put them on chairs, put them wherever there was floor space. It was like standing room only for presents, and I have several years of uh, Christmas Eve home movies now I can look at and confirm, yeah, that was not just I was a small kid and there was a big area in the basement was presents. No, it was a lot. There was a lot of presents there. But that feeling of seeing that stack, is that Christmas, right? And so yeah, this wasn't just limited to my grandparents' house. At my parents' house, there was also stacks of presents, right? We wouldn't see them because they were. Parents always had like some freaking place in the house they were keeping stuff, and you'd think you know every part of the house, and somehow you'd wake up on Christmas morning, and they've emptied the crevices of the house of all the stuff they've been holding out on. And what's wild is they kept stuff from each other, right? Uh, but like when you're a kid and you see the amount of presents, it hits, right? And they say it's the season of giving, and that's reasonable. That's a very fine thing to attach to the season. But it's hard to get that through your head when you're a kid. It's so much easier to think about getting than it is giving. Children are by definition not terribly mature, so I don't you try to teach that to kids, and but like, what can you do? They're kids. Kids are going to be kids, right? Don't get me wrong. My siblings and I were definitely spoiled. I don't want to let we were spoiled. Often spoiled. We were spoiled rotten. But when you're a kid, you make a list, and you find some way to communicate to Santa Claus what is on that list. When you're 6 or 7 and you're growing up in the 90s, you demonstrate computer literacy by going on, your computer or a computer at school and typing out a list and printing several copies of it, handing it to whoever needs to see it. There's someone in your life that can recall, like asking for one thing on Christmas on that list of theirs, whether it was handwritten, printed, typed, just verbalized. They can remember asking for that and getting it, and that's like one of the common cornerstones of your Hallmark Christmas movie, right? The perfect gift. When you're a kid with no job, it's not uncommon for mom, dad, whoever can help, and grandparents, whoever's taking care of you, to try to like facilitate you getting gifts for people. Be like front the cash, take you to the store, or whatever. And then the point is that you're supposed to pick something out, and it's the thought that counts. We hear that sentiment a lot. The thought that counts. It's the season of giving. It's totally reasonable, and I'm not going to attempt to argue with that at all. But when you grow up and you start making your own money, you're kind of on your own. You figure it out. It's always been the most stressful part for me, is the figuring it out part. All too often I would hear about waiting to the last minute, something that people don't necessarily grow out of. Often from my dad. My mom would be at work, my dad would be at home, and like he'd ask us like, you guys got Christmas figured out? And my siblings and I would be like, no, what do we do? And it's like December 22nd, December 23rd, and we he'd be like, all right, get in the car, and we get in the car and we had to go to the mall, and that was usually the dynamic we were in the last minute situation. But while we're talking about the malls, malls just aren't what they used to be, and that's because retail isn't what it used to be. In North County, growing up, we had 3 malls. We had Jamestown Mall, which they started demolishing in September. I was there. By now, I think they're done. They're making quick work of it. I don't know what they're putting there. It had been a dead mall forever. We also had Northwest Plaza, which had been called many things. I knew it as Northwest Plaza. Northwest Plaza felt kind of like the spicy Jamestown. You could go to Jamestown all the time, but you only got to go to Northwest Plaza as a treat. And I don't know why that is, because Northwest was way closer to where we lived than Jamestown was, in my opinion. At least it felt quicker. But then we got the Mills, right? The Mills dealt the death blows to both Jamestown and Northwest Plaza. And, consumers love the latest and greatest, right? Brand new facility. That thing opened up in like winter or holiday season of 2002 or 2003. You could not pay for a parking spot. This place had 1 floor. I don't think it had any freaking cool fountains at all. And it was the most popular mall, like, for a couple years. And so, we still have malls in St. Louis. they're in parts of the St. Louis area that I don't want to say are wealthier, but like, I don't know, they're different, right? They're just different. West County, St. Charles, South County, North County doesn't have much in the way of malls anymore, and it's probably because we've had 3 collapse in the last 20 years. And so, but when you would walk into when you, as a kid, walking into the mall, whether it's the, whether it's the like the last minute or probably sometime before that, because you went to the mall a lot, you'd see like the changing of the guard, right? You'd see the poinsettias and the giant ornaments and the giant freaking tree and the decor, and suddenly now in like the food court or something, there's this like toy looking house that Santa sits in front of, and you could tell like it's here. It's finally here. Christmas season is upon us. Get ready. But is that feeling of like that hype? Is that what Christmas is? This isn't something I've experienced in retail since I was a kid. Not because it doesn't exist anymore, but because I am not a kid anymore. That rush of it's finally here just doesn't hit the same way when you grow up and you want, especially when you work retail, you dread how fast time is actually going and not how slow it used to go. When Christmas season rolls up every year, especially if you're working retail, you're left with this feeling of like, again, how? It just happened, right? And like, where did the time go? And for me, instead of reflecting, like, oh, it's the end of the year, time to do some reflection and get some stuff done, wrap some stuff up, tie some loose ends, I just spend all of December panicking and stressing about how I'm going to make Christmas happen. And I said, it's never like a money thing. It's just like it's a brain thing. And so, all year round, I'm buying tools and taking up new hobbies. And to justify doing that, I feel like it's important for me to utilize those resources in making presents for people. My niece and nephew, they've been getting handmade gifts out of wood, toys, right? They're getting toys. They're getting blocks of Lincoln Logs and stuff. One year I made my brother this really cool, I thought it was really cool. It's like a picture frame, but it's the size of a Pokemon card, so you can put like a rare card or whatever in there. And it's made out of like epoxy, so it's like clear. But in the epoxy, I set some booster packs, right? Like the booster pack wrappers that corresponded to the card that goes in the frame. I made him one. It made me one. I thought they were really cool. I made my dad a diorama of a garage, and in it had like a scale model of his old Trans Am. I made my dad some guitar pedals because I know how to make some guitar pedals. I made Roxanne like a plant stand she wanted. She can show me some examples of plant stands and sits in our living room now, covered with plants. I've made cutting boards and router bowls and TV trays. Just doing whatever I can to just make stuff with what I have. And so it seems fitting just to take those resources that I collect and time I spend on tools and woodworking and learning new hobbies, put some of that into the giving back at the end of the year. However, this takes its toll. It's a heavy toll. I manage time very poorly. I bite off more than I can chew. I've always called it pushing. And when I tell people I'm pushing, like my family, that when I tell them I'm pushing right now, they almost always urge me to stop. It's like I'm pushing myself, right? I'm just working too hard. I take time off of work, like unexpected time off of work, sometimes the week before Christmas that I didn't want to take to make things happen. I work late into the night. Several Christmases in a row, I show up to my parents' house on Christmas morning and hadn't slept since I left Christmas Eve because I just had to keep working through the night. I've become this sleep-deprived zombie, a walking shell of an ADH-riddled Renaissance man that's giving it 110% in an already like socially taxing time of the year. And I hate that feeling I get when it's all said and done, where I feel like I have to spend a week recovering, just to kind of get things feel like I get my circadian rhythm back together. I dread how I look at some of the family gatherings because I don't remember even being there. I just know that someone drove me there and I showed up and I probably looked like a ghost. But I'm glad to be able to at least look back at what I was able to give through doing that. But is that stress, is that work ethic, is that Christmas to me anymore? And this year I decided to pull back. I couldn't do it as much as I did before. I decided I'm not going to make every present, right? I've made that commitment before. Also, for the record, when it comes to the toll, like several years I've injured myself working on stuff. I usually go to Christmas Eve or Christmas covered in Band-Aids. Tools are dangerous. Respect them. Learn how to use them. It was never like life threatening, but it was I did hurt myself. Anyway, several years when I show up to these events, like as I'm losing consciousness, like probably Christmas morning, I convey once people have opened up their presents, I say something along the lines of like, "I'm just buying you guys stuff next year. I can't do this anymore." And no one ever asked me to do this. This is something I'm taking on myself. I'm to blame. And they're all like, "Yes, do it, please. You look awful. This is not. Don't." And so this year I decided to take them up on that. I'm making less presents this year. The, the thing that sucks is in those moments, my family can see me at the most exhausted I am during the entire year. Not during my races, my rallies, where I'm, in a car for hours and hours, and my watch says I'm hitting like 190 BPM heart rate, and things about to explode out of my chest. That doesn't exhaust me like this has exhausted me, right? And so I am a ghost forcibly piloting a meat Gundam that is low on battery and needs an oil change in those moments. So last year, 2022, I don't think I made presents for everyone, but I made a good amount of presents. But I also decided I was going to make for both my grandmas and my parents. Was the first test printings of my book. Several people in my life have told me forever to write a book or to become a writer, something in that vein. I started working on a photo autobiographical series that it was like a project I did in 2018 that just kept going. I called it Dates and Locations, or Dates Plus Locations, and what I would do is I would focus in on a certain date that corresponded to an anniversary of an event that shaped my life in some way. I would go to a location that's tied to that event and take a self-portrait, and then in the same day also write up the relevant story behind that combination of date and location and the photo. It was really just kind of like a blog adjacent thing. I put it on my Facebook, and it was originally meant for online, so I don't know that it was ever intended to be a book when I started, but eventually I started realizing I should just make this into a book. My stories were getting more and more verbose and long-winded, much like this video probably already has been and is still nowhere near done. I was also getting to the point where I'm like, if I'm going to make a book out of it, if I'm going to publish it, I need to stop actually printing the whole story online, so there's something for people to read when they buy the book. And so I started watching, I follow photographers on YouTube, and they were doing like zines and photo books, but they were just like, all those were just the photos, and that's cool for sure. Photo books are definitely cool, but I never felt that my photography was good enough to be looked at that way. Especially not self-portraits, right? And so the alternative to that was to just take the stories and write an autobiography. But I think autobiographies are something that's tied to, like, those are like reserved for people that are like famous and have done great things and have had a lot of life behind them. And don't get me wrong, like 32 years is a lot. It's a long time. I'm not disputing that. I would like to believe that I have double that left in me. That'd be great. But I felt like an autobiography would be arrogant, right? like, who's gonna go into a bookstore, see an autobiography with this face on it, and be like, I have no idea who this person is, never heard of them before. I'm gonna buy their book, right? It felt weird, and so my approach, especially like I was like in my late 20s when I started doing this. My approach was just like combine them both, right? And so what I did just that, right? I said there was 29 entries in the series when I capped it off. So there's 29 photos, 29 stories. It spans like 160 pages in. I swear this isn't an ad. In like a sideways book format that I specifically wanted for this. That the landscape the landscape photos were landscape in the book, and they took a whole page. The portrait pictures did suffer, but they, it was not a common form factor of a book, and the significance of that is that I had to I wanted to go to see what it took to get it printed. Getting a book printed for like 4 or 5 copies is much more expensive than getting per copy than getting a lot of them done. But it takes a lot of upfront cost. And so the only way to get this done was for me to print it myself. I literally went to the store and picked out, the paper stock, printed 5 copies of it off in my basement office, learned how to do bookbinding, bound the spine of the pages, and then custom made covers out of book board and maps and calendars, and bound it all together. And over the course of that time frame, I had effectively not just written a book, but published and printed. However, Christmas Eve looked different that year. This is a year ago at this point. My grandma was in some kind of like recovery facility, like a therapy, physical therapy type place. It was similar, gave similar vibes to like a retirement home, right? And so she had kept falling, which, I mean, it's a thing that older folks tend to struggle with. She was having a hard time eating food, maintaining an appetite, and medically just wasn't in the best shape. In a similar fashion to what we did in 2020, we all decided, hey, we're all just going to take turns and going to go see Grandma, in the facility, and that's how we're going to spend Christmas Eve, right? Go see her. The main difference being, of course, is that it wasn't happening in the house. It was happening in the facility. And so I had a key to the house. And I thought several times I should just go up and just spend some time there by myself and do some reflection. And just to say I was in the building for Christmas Eve, but I didn't end up doing that. My parents hosted Christmas Eve that night instead at their house, which, wasn't any different of a drive. And, their house and my house and my grandparents' house actually all have the same floor plan, more or less. It felt more cramped at my parents' house because they put everyone in the living room instead of the full finished basement that my grandparents' house has. And there were like 13 people. It just was a really claustrophobic situation. And I remember going to visit my grandma in that facility. I think I saw my cousin's name on the sign-in sheet. I think it was like one visitor at a time, one set of visitors at a time, right? And that place still had a masking policy. I can't quite remember. COVID is a blur now. I can't remember when waves started and ended, when variants came and went. And so I think Omicron might have been the big talk in 2022. I can't remember. But I was still masking everywhere I went, so it didn't bother me at all. After the pandemic started, my grandma rarely saw me without a mask on. Now, because of the nature of the pandemic, I had 2 masks that I would alternate between. I had my 3M paint respirator. That was my daily carry. It was a grocery store, Target, gas station. It kept me from getting COVID for the entire, those 3 years where I was masking. It seemed to have done its job. But there were times where I would wear what I called my formal mask, which was for formal events, weddings, funerals, stuff where I didn't want to generate or draw any extra attention to myself. And I feel like I was probably wearing my formal mask that night. and I think my formal mask was black. It was just mashed with stuff, you know. And so, you know, I got there and she's like, yeah, the food here is awful. It's reportedly awful. The TV is nothing. There's never anything on the TV, which I, you know, silently took exception to because she was watching This Old House, which is like the Bob Ross Joy of Painting equivalent for home improvement. Great show. I've learned so much from This Old House. It rules. But I was going to tell her, you know, that no, Grandma, this show rules. And she just couldn't wait to get out of there, right? She's longing to get. I think like from that point, I think she was like 3 or 4 days out from being released. But you know, I spent my time there like I intended to, and I presented her my book, and I feel like I cannot be sure. I cannot guarantee it because I don't know if this is something I made up in my head or if it actually happened. I'm like at 80% sure this happened. I gave her the book that I had finally written, that you know she'd been asking for so long, and she said to me, "I always knew you could do it." The same exact thing my grandpa said the last time I saw him, and maybe that's when I should have known that it was going to be the same for her. Christmas went on as best we could make it happen, but I woke up to a call like 5 days later or something like that, like almost a week later. Not quite New Year's Eve though, telling me that she had passed away. My mom had called me. She was 89, so yeah, she outlived my grandpa by 9 years. When you live on the same street as your parents and your grandparents forever, when you're not forced to go to bed by parental bedtimes, and you know you can be pretty much anywhere you want in your house at any time, midnight, 1, 2 a.m., and you see the red and blue lights of emergency vehicles go down your street, your heart jumps, it skips a beat. You go into fight or flight mode almost. I would run upstairs, look outside. Is that thing stopping at my grandparents' house? Is it stopping at my parents' house? Is it going down the street? Is it turning the corner? Where is it going? And I had to just sit there and wait and watch as it just would drive and just see where it's stopping and make sure it's out of view. Make sure they didn't pass the house and are turning around. And like enough years of that, you just like I don't know. It's not that I expected it. It's not that I was ready for it. I think I was just maintaining a certain level-headedness about the whole thing because anytime my basement window would light up with emergency vehicle lights, there was that inkling thought in my brain of like oh no, this is it. It's happening. This is the time I'm going to have to come face to face with this. I also had a key, and so I would often let emergency workers into the house. There was a lockbox that had problems. It didn't seem to want to work all the time. And so I was actually terrified that one time I would be like it would quickly be revealed that it would be my last time opening that door. You know what I mean? And so when I got the call from my mom, it was like it's like a Band-Aid that had been violently tugged on several times each time I saw those ambulance lights, right? But it never got quite torn off. And when my mom called me, it was like it was another violent tug, but there just wasn't a lot of Band-Aid left to take off. And so it's a very complicated subject. It's a very morbid conversation to have, but it's relevant to this. When people leave us, how we process this is different for everyone, and by no means do I feel like anyone should look at my experience and think that it should be universal, and nor do I think anyone should have the right to suggest that their experiences are universal, especially my own. Just because I handle it one way doesn't mean that I should expect anyone else to be able to handle it as easily as I did, to just tap dance through the emotional minefield that is the loss of a family matriarch. Yeah, and so if you're watching this and you're like, why was your emotional response not this or that? Why did it not match my own? It's because we're different people with different experiences. And when the emotions are the same, the way they present themselves to others could be wildly different. With my grandma's passing, the house would eventually be coming up for sale. We knew this. My mom and my uncle spent time after the funeral cleaning out the garbage, preparing an estate sale to liquidate the belongings. I think I waited till a month after the funeral before I decided to reveal to my mom my master plan that I was going to buy the house. She went from like, "Don't be stupid. You can't just buy the house," to coming around and actually embracing the idea. This was the only way to keep this house in the family, and I wanted to keep it in the family. I spent most of my summer working through that process, and making that happen. And then in early August, I signed the quit deed and became part owner with my mom. My uncle very reasonably wanted to get his equity out of the house. The market was really hot, and he's a grandpa now himself. He's got grandkids, and he lives close to his grandkids, just like my grandparents lived close to me. And the money he was able to get out of the house can be put towards doing grandfatherly things for his grandkids, just like my grandparents had done for me. I don't know what happened to my parents' houses, but I presume that they were left to my grandparents, and that equity was liquidated and was part of what funded their ability to be grandparents to me. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with my uncle wanting to get to do what he wanted to do with his half of the house, you know. And so I have this second house now. I'm in it, for the record. Yeah, I've been playing the verbiage game. I'm in it. This is it. This is the house. This is the basement I spent like almost all my Christmas Eves in. And so I spent time decorating it and getting it ready to bring Christmas Eve back here. It's been a while since I feel like the whole family crew has been to a Christmas Eve here, and now obviously that can't quite happen with both my grandparents gone. But we can carry on in their honor and maintain this decade-old tradition. But is this Christmas? Is this Christmas? And no, there's actually so much wrong with this, right? Like it hasn't even been a year yet. Just because I was able to process things doesn't mean everyone else has had the time to process things. Just because I was tasked with helping get stuff out of the house doesn't mean that everyone is ready to experience this place without my grandparents here. I've been trying extra hard to make it exactly as my grandparents left it, but like, is that helping or is that hurting? Does that make this place a museum or a mausoleum? To me, this place is a reminder of how they lived, but not that they are gone. It's not like art. It'll be interpreted by and affect everyone differently. Like, what did I just say in the last bit, right? We are different people, and even when the emotions are the same, the way they present themselves to each other, to others, could be wildly different. We all miss my grandparents. That's a no-brainer. But the ways that comes about in us, it could be wildly different. And another thing I've alluded to is that, yeah, like my sister has kids now. My cousin has kids. My grandma left this earth with 3 grandkids. With 3 great grandkids. Families sprawl out. I heard a woman on Jeopardy the other day talk about how she had 18 grandkids. My grandparents had 4 grandkids, for the record. This woman on Jeopardy had 18. I hear so often from other people that they have tons and tons of cousins. I have like 2. That being said, I'm a family tree nerd. I like thinking about like what the various types of cousin relationships. And so when I say I have 2, I mean I have 2 direct first cousins. I have several first cousins once removed. My parents' cousins are first cousins once removed. If you're not terribly familiar with that, I have a handful of second cousins, etc. It goes on and on. But like, I hear from other people about holiday traditions changing, or like this year we're going to this person's house. Last year we went to this person's house. Like it just seems like whoever wants to host it in a given year. I don't know how many people can say that they have had basically the same Christmas Eve and Christmas Day every year for 32 years. And maybe that's what makes it harder to consider alternatives, because I've been doing it for so long. My cousin did it for 35 and eventually was forced to break the habit, and has dealt with that, and so I didn't have to deal with it. I didn't have to come face to face with that until very recently in my life. When I started dating Roxanne, I had to also consider the fact that she has family traditions, and those hopefully coincide timeline-wise with what I want to do. And I'm not entirely incapable of adopting new traditions, for the record. Like I said, what is tonight? It's Festivus. In 2010, my friends invited me to their annual Festivus celebration on the 23rd of December. That was easy enough to adopt because it didn't interfere with anything I had already been, that was part of my schedule. In fact, honestly, that made Christmas a 3-day thing. I would make it a 4-day thing if I had a tradition that wanted to start up on the 22nd or the 26th. Do it in a heartbeat. But like Festivus at that point, Festivus was for friends. Christmas Eve was extended family. Christmas Day was immediate family. And so yeah, I've talked a lot about traditions here, but is traditions Christmas? What about family? Is family Christmas? I haven't ever used Ancestry before. Deeply fascinated by it. I've watched my sister use it. I've watched my grandma on my dad's side use it. Looks cool. Very expensive. So I don't know if they have if they can automatically generate you a family tree. I just draw mine out for fun, just to see how much I can remember of who connects to who. But when you consider how it changes over time, you see that corralling the same people and their descendants and then their descendants all for a gathering in the same place at the same time becomes exponentially problematic. If I go back and look at the 1995 Christmas home movie videotape I have, I see my parents, I see my grandparents, my great-grandma, my grandpa's mom, my cousin, her parents. That's like 10 people. My sister gets born before the turn of the millennium. My cousin grows up, gets married, has kids. My grandparents pass away. My sister grows up, has kid. My mom's cousin comes around, gets married, has kid. I enter into a long-term relationship. Roxanne comes around now. Before long, if you try to wrangle all these people together, you run out of space. And it becomes more and more chaotic. And it becomes more stressful. And so I'm struggling to find out. I'm struggling to learn what I want here. But I'm I wouldn't turn anyone away. That was the problem. But people move on. People go on to form their own traditions. They form their own sub-family traditions. People have their own family that you might not know anything about. Like, I don't know anything about my cousin's husband's family, right? I just haven't learned it. But they probably are wondering why they never see my cousin and their kids on Christmas Eve, because they were always coming here, right? There's so much more to the way people are connected than just what you can remember from your traditions. And all of this assumes that people are geographically in the same area, which most of my family on my mom's side is. Families also grow apart, not just in like the connections, but on the planet. Sometimes you have to forego your ideas of who is going to be at Christmas. An idea can be simple, but that doesn't make it easy, right? We learn the concept behind splitting an atom is simple. Doing it is not easy. So it's simple, right? If I build it, they will come. If I host Christmas Eve, people will show up. Maybe not. It's because of how humans are. We went through the throes of a pandemic that made it difficult to do anything the way we did it before 2020. COVID had us rethinking all of our traditions, our very way of life, because to most of us, this was unlike anything we'd ever seen. It was, remember what they said? Unprecedented times, all the time. Unprecedented times. Is the pandemic even over? I can't tell, and I don't want to dwell too much on it because I spent a lot of time focusing on the pandemic while it was like really going on. But here's the thing: cases are up. Look at the amount of COVID that's being seen in wastewater. That's what I use. I don't use cases anymore. I use wastewater samples. I'm not collecting wastewater samples. There's a website I use. I'm not. Yeah. But we're trying to move on from that, and trying to move on from that, and trying to, as people, as a species, learn to live with it. I hate that I'm saying that, because that's what they talked about so much in like 2021. We have to learn to live with it. It's not going away. I guess what I'm afraid of is that the iron is hot. And when the iron is hot, you strike. And that part of me feels that it's important to establish that this tradition isn't going anywhere, as long as I have anything to do about it. Like, I'm afraid that if I don't facilitate this happening, those that have gone on to reevaluate if those that weren't sure this would still be a thing are going to go found their new traditions that I'm not a part of. And so, again, even though I don't actually think it's that simple, that being said, I realized on a drive the other night that what's important is that the tradition persists not because people show up. It's not. I won't get deterred if people don't show up, but it's important that the tradition persists so that they can show up when they're ready if they want to come back. Last year, I was prepared just to let myself into this house so I could experience some of the evening here, just to be here, right? Should anyone decide that they also want to experience that moving forward, I want that door to be open. I want that oven to be hot. I want that tree to be lit and standing tall. I want mounds of presents beneath it. I want the smells, the sights, the sounds to be here for whenever someone needs to remember what Christmas was like here several years ago. So I've been asking myself this question this whole time: is this Christmas? And I feel like there's a more meaningful answer to this question out there somewhere, or the question of what is Christmas, that I haven't gotten an answer for yet. I've talked about memories and family and giving, gifts, lights, trees, houses, even malls, right? And obviously to many there's a religious element to the holidays that I just didn't feel prepared to delve too much into, because I feel like I feel like we never went to church on Christmas, or usually Christmas Eve. Despite we were a church family, we went to church every Sunday. It just Jesus was a part of life. But again, my religious studies have fallen short, and so you might be watching this video and the whole time screaming like the answer from the answer is Jesus, and very much so. I'm not going to dispute that. I can't deny that there's obviously a connection there. But also for several people, it has evolved into something that is non-religious, and it's so much more than that now, and that is what happens with holidays, right? And so I'm trying to cover all the bases here. If it makes you feel any better, stop the video, rewind the video, watch it again, and just watch it with the thinking of religion as well. Religion can divide people, and I understand that this is a time where religions are celebrated. And I'm already being divisive enough by talking very specifically about Christmas, but it's what I grew up celebrating. All holidays are valid, and so I got this. I've got a core question now that's resulting in answers that I feel like aren't enough or just don't feel correct, and so I had to ask myself: am I asking the correct questions? If you don't like the answers you're getting to the questions you're asking, you have to ask better questions. It's a feedback loop, right? And now it's I took a lot for granted and never had to ask these questions, and now I have to ask these questions. And now things are a lot less stable, a lot less granted, if you will. And so I have several things to look at as I go through this holiday season and probably the next holiday season. And I'm going to have to start forming my own idea of what the holidays mean. And when I find the answer, if I ever find the answer, I probably won't actually film another video. This is just what I'm going through this year, trying to figure it out. I don't know how to catch what I'm chasing, but I'll know once I've caught it. It's been a long video. I have no idea how long it is. I've lost track. And if you're still here, I really appreciate that, because it's just me. It's a video of one dude sitting in front of a Christmas tree, a fake Christmas tree, ranting about the holidays. For what holidays are left in the year, I hope yours are happy and warm and everything you expect them to be, whatever that means. It's a wild card. You tell yourself what it's supposed to be and hope that happens for you. And to those that do celebrate, Merry Christmas, have a stellar Christmas Eve, and then on top of that, we also have New Year's. So I'm not going to make another video before New Year's, so hopefully 2024 is better for you than 2023 was, because that's that's a universal gift. A better year than the last year. Thanks for watching. This is the second video I've done in the last couple months that's very long and just me talking in front of a camera. Don't know how many more of these I'm going to do. But yeah, thanks for watching. This is a vulnerable experience, and I hope I made some sense.